Mark Carnegie from MHC Digital Group. I'm very, very blessed to have today. I've been doing podcasts for the last 3 years, and I know I've got a few listeners out there. But this is completely different to the norm. So, mate, first and foremost, welcome.
Thanks very much for having me.
And I'm super keen to deep dive about, obviously, all things crypto. Mm-hmm. But mate, before we start, can I find out a little bit more about Mark? Do you mind just giving us a couple of minutes? Where did it all begin? Where were you born?
Proper
and
origin
a bit more
story.
About yourself.
Yeah. So So basically, child of privilege. My dad was a big mining company executive down in Victoria. Grew up in Melbourne. Had a couple of years overseas early on, and then went back to my second university in England, then a couple of years on Wall Street for a guy called Jim Wolfenson, who then went on to run the World Bank, really prominent Australian investment banker. Then early private equity, real estate, private equity in the UK. And then I spent 10 years with a big West Coast American private equity firm called Hellman and Friedman, and simultaneously was chairman of Australia's biggest advertising agency with John Singleton and Martin Sorrell, which was Ogilvy and Mather and J. Walter Thompson. Then I started a business with a son of Queensland, John Wiley, Carnegie Wiley, which we then sold to Lazard, the big American investment bank. And then 10 or 12 years ago, I started MH Carnegie as really small venture and private equity business, and then found myself, managing $1 billion of private equity and real estate private equity. And then, crypto came along, and we'll talk about that in a second. But that's broadly my thing. 3 daughters, all of whom now live in the United Kingdom.
Wow. How old are your daughters?
They are 30, 28 and 26.
Whereabouts in England are they?
They're all in London. Well, 2 are in London and 1's at Oxford.
Oh, beautiful.
Yep.
And, mate, you're a Victorian, so what team do you support down there?
The Demons, mate.
Oh, okay.
I've had a torrid time.
You have, you poor thing. Yeah. But, mate, I know AFL's growing. I'm based in Brisbane, and it's certainly grown in the last probably good 20 years here since the success of the Lions.
It's a completely different thing.
It is. In Victoria last year, I went to watch Brisbane versus Collingwood, and it's just passion. It's a religion down there, isn't it?
Unbelievable,
mate. I when I was looking at your online, I noticed one thing that stood out to me, and the reason why I want to talk about it is just that you advised Coles Meyer and Qantas with their strategic matters.
Yeah,
what was that like, mate?
Well, it's a different world, mate. When we get to crypto, my description is there's sort of the attacker hand in business and the defender hand in business, and you're advising really huge organizations that feel very much like an aircraft carrier, and getting them to change and move is extraordinarily hard. They've got huge amounts of sort of inherent competitive advantage because of scale, but getting them to change is really, really hard. So I didn't find that a particularly interesting thing to do because you just couldn't do that much. So
it's huge,
it's interesting.
Right? And the reason,
it's proximity to power, stuff like that. But I find what I'm doing now a lot more interesting.
Well, the reason I'm talking about it, because I want to give the listeners and people out there with where we're about to go to is the strategic part.
Yep.
And where it goes into, and I mean, let's just jump into it straight away. You were by the sounds of it, you've been so heavily involved in the fiat system for so long.
Yep.
Now it's completely different in terms of the crypto sector.
Yep.
Why the jump and why the change?
So we were talking before about Buffett, and my hero, in fact, is Charlie Munger, who described crypto as rat poison. And said he'd ban it. So the jump for me, given that he is my intellectual idol, was huge, and I, like everyone, hated it when it started, and said, this is just a scam, it's a bubble, it's going to finish, la, 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 la. So I missed it before, really, I didn't look at it until Bitcoin $800, What changed it for me was, in fact, using one of Charlie and Warren's own arguments. What they say is, think about inverting stuff. Think about thinking it through, not from where you are now, but the reverse. Yeah. And there's another thing out there that the hedge fund guys talk about, which is, if you really want to short something and there's some people who are hair on fire bulls on it, go and find the smartest one of them to be able to, what they call, steel man the argument. So instead of creating a straw man that you can knock down, find the toughest people to argue about it. Now, the steel man part was really, really hard to find somebody, but I came across a guy called Balaji, who's on Twitter. Very, very clever guy. And the core breakthrough for me was understanding what Bitcoin did, yeah, which was solve a computer problem that people had posed in the mid-1980s that had stayed unsolved for 20 years. And that was, how do you create a trusted arrangement when you don't trust anybody? Because all the computers in the world, all the scamming in the world, all the everything in the world, it's virtually impossible to think through how you're going to be able to trust something that turns up on a computer. And
you know what, Mark? The majority of people that I've only just jumped into it for the last 12 months, pure and simply, my wife was the one that made me do it, right?
Yeah.
The majority of people, when you speak about it, have that skepticism.
Yep. But ask how many.
But it's growing at a rapid pace, right? And
ask, do you know what the Byzantine general's problem is? Do you know what crypto was trying to solve? Right? Not one. That is the foundation block of all of this, which is, with all these computers around, with all this scamming, with all this hacking, you got to find some way to. You've either got to rely on the government, which has not worked particularly well for people, yeah, or you got to rely on the banks, which ain't worked particularly well for people, or you got to come up with something new. Now, if the answer is, well, I want to trust the government, God love you, mate. After our biggest allies just gone and done what they've done, I'm not feeling particularly warm and cozy about trying to trust anybody other than myself right at the moment. So in that world, I'm feeling pretty good about.
I'm keen to, and let's start there, right? In simplistic terms, for me, let's break down for beginners.
Yep.
How does crypto work in simple terms?
The answer is, there is nothing simple about it other than you can trust what crypto says in a different way to other things. Yeah. In the end, you've got to rely on the bank, yeah, or the government, or some other centralized power. What crypto does is say, here's a ledger, yeah, which is held on a decentralized basis, which everyone agrees on, so you don't have to trust anybody. And that was what it was created for. After the GFC in 2008, a whole series of people said they went and saved a whole lot of people on Wall Street, and they sent our parents broke because that suited them. We don't want that system to obtain. So when you own Bitcoin in a cold wallet, no one can take it off you. Full stop, end of story.
And it's the same price what it would be in Mongolia or as opposed to, say, the United States, right? Bitcoin's exactly the same, whereas the fiat system is completely different.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
so
Mongolia,
the common misconceptions
controls Mongolia. The US, it's unclear whether the Fed or the Treasury actually controls that. I won't bore you with the details about merging the balance sheets and stuff like that. But trust me, if you actually bother to spend the time on it, yeah, fiat is a horrible, horrible system, fiat currencies, yeah?
But, yeah, I totally agree, actually,
Yeah, so that's it. But then the second part is, I think what's happened with the Trump run is you've bifurcated crypto, and Bitcoin, which is effectively digital gold, is currently a completely different thing to the rest of the the crypto space. My personal favorite's Ethereum, who's having a terrible time at the moment, but the crypto can do things in terms of moving money around, or crypto can be digital gold. And so there's two parts to crypto.
I'm super keen to jump into your thoughts on a couple, which I've got a little bit down the page, if that's cool. But before we just move on, what is the common misconceptions and risks that, that in terms of out there for people, right? What is the common misconception for this?
The common misconception is your coin's going to do better than other people's. Yeah. That what's happened as a result of the government's printing as much money as they have and having these unsustainable deficits, and what's been going on with this day trading, single day options, all of that, it's turned the world financial markets into casinos. Yeah. And so people think whether it's Robinhood or day trading or whatever, I can make a lot of money just punting. Yeah. And so crypto, as well as Robinhood, all of this has stopped it becoming investing and turned it into gambling. Yeah. And what I urge people to do is avoid thinking about that they can outplay this game. If they want to have a flutter on this instead of the pokies, fine. But if you're going to do it, either Bitcoin only, if you think you want some digital gold, or find some fund manager for the rest of it, yeah, so that you can learn.
And that was probably my next part, right? Like, what would be the first steps that you'd say to someone about looking to invest into crypto? Number one, you would obviously look to engage yourself in your business, because I believe, obviously, you've been doing it for so long. What would be the first steps?
The first steps is do not, if you've got 100 bananas in your portfolio, do not think about having more than 5 bananas in crypto, right? You should not have more than 5% allocation to this space. Yeah. And so first, this is highly, highly asymmetric asset class at the moment. It's been proved over a long period of time that despite all the haters, if haters don't do it, it's incredibly expensive for somebody's portfolio. But as a diversifier and everything else, no more than 5%. So that's just hard rule number one. Yeah. Hard rule number two is dollar cost average, which you've got the volatility that you've got at the moment, where this, routinely 50% vol, if not 100%. You've seen it go up and down, like a yo-yo. So if you're going to put 5 bananas in it, put 1 banana in every quarter or half or month, but you really, really can destroy yourself on the volatility of this. So
that's good to know.
So less than 5%, dollar cost average, you absolutely have to do. Yeah. And then decide whether it's coming out of what I'd call the venture capital and speculative part of your portfolio, or it's coming out of, I hate this inflation, I remember gold, should I be doing gold? And put it into the sleeve that's really gold, a digital gold alternative. So you got to think about it in two different ways.
Is it part of the world that's using crypto for, lending and finance?
Sure. There's $50 trillion a year traded. 50T, not BT. Yeah.
Do you see traditional banks? Do you see traditional banks using it as some form of security, obviously, moving forward?
The US is out of control in terms of adopting. It's just Australia had a whole series of different rules and has chosen to completely discount it. And, it's a bizarre thing that Australia hates it so much, given if you look at the Aussie dollar going from effectively parity or more than parity in the GFC to approaching 50 cents at the moment, yeah, crypto would have been a way better asset class for Australia than it is Americans, yeah? And yet the Yanks, they had a whole lot of people who were evangelists for this, kept it alive, are adopting it, are finding ways to integrated into their financial system, and we're doing nothing here, and it's been vastly more costly for us not doing it.
So if for the listeners out there, if they've got, let's say for argument's sake, can you see it, or is it happening in the States where you've got $1,000 in Bitcoin?
Yep.
You've got no bricks and mortar. Do you see the bank using that as some form of security?
Sure.
Or you then obviously liquefy that into
at the moment,
fiat, which
you
can
can't get margin on it here, but you absolutely can. I mean, the Commerce Secretary in America is lending a huge amount in the business he just left behind, Lutnick. Yeah, so you can put it on margin in the US. You just can't margin it in Australia.
And do you see it coming here where you'll be able to pay for coffee, you'll be able to pay for food, and you'll be able to use a Bitcoin?
There's huge numbers of people around the world who are doing that at the moment, where you can take your Bitcoin and pay for stuff like that. The truth is, Australia's got a pretty good, pay wave, tap wave stuff. And so probably it doesn't need to get adopted here in the way that it does in other places, because we've done a pretty good job of actually having system-wide contactless payments. So I don't think it's going to get quite as good mainstream adoption there in Australia doing that.
Because we are becoming somewhat very much a cashless society, right?
Yep.
So we're already using them, and the fiat system is somewhat a crypto digital currency at the moment, right?
You just charge 5%, mate, for every transaction. So it's a drag. It's very, very expensive, but it works.
Talk about regulation. We know that the fiat system, particularly in Australia, being in the finance sector myself and yourself, is like the regulatory can be very cumbersome and in a good way, because we had a lot of cowboys in many years prior. Crypto, I know that. Do you see us adopting the same regulatory kind of bodies moving forward from a global sense, number one, but also in Australia?
I thought you made a really good point, Barry, which is, look, when you actually dig down, this contactless payments is close to crypto, and that's what people don't understand. That's a sort of interbank type of crypto, what they call a closed blockchain rather than open blockchain, So there's no doubt it's all going to just collide, and the regulation is going to work in a particular way. And my guess is we take a lead off the US, however the US has done the stablecoin stuff to reduce the 5% frictional drag on the economy as a result of that. And then I think you're absolutely right, which is the regulation's going to be the same for everything. And that's always been our argument, which is we're not the biggest or the first crypto player in Australia, but we do think we are the best regulated crypto player in Australia. We're the only one that has a retail MIS given by ASIC. We continue to have a whole series of what I'd call TradFi regulatory licenses to be able to play in this game, and we're not people who are trying to do it without regulation. We think it's ridiculous.
And obviously with your business at MHC Digital, you've got a banking license, I believe, too. I remember seeing.
We've got
that's correct.
Not a full sale
AFSL.
Not a full scale wholesale banking license, but we have payments licenses, ASIC licenses, all sorts of different ones. So 5 or 6 separate licenses.
And for the people out there, I mean, I've got a couple of more questions as well. But while we're on it, if for people out there that are scared, don't know where to start, it's like going to the old traditional stockbroking. You'd be getting an ETF as such, right? Because you don't want someone else to look at it. At MHC Digital, you do that for clients, and you'll completely walk them through what the pitfalls are and what the advantages are.
Yeah, but I mean, truthfully, you can buy a Bitcoin ETF, right? If you're, I don't want to be selling us, right? I think this is a revolution that Australia, on our calculations, Australia has lost somewhere between $300 and $600 billion by virtue of the incumbent financial services organizations and the super funds saying, we don't want to know about crypto. So it's a massive, massive, massive catastrophe for the superannuants of Australia. Yeah. I'm here to say it's not going away. be very prudent about it because it's an asymmetric bet. Yeah. Dollar cost average and be careful. And the truth is, you can buy Bitcoin in an ETF today, right? And any one of your clients can ring up you and say, mate, I just like some Bitcoin. You can hopefully, as a result of this, say, mate, okay, if you want to put $10,000 into it, let's do it 1,000 a month or 1,000 a quarter, and be careful about it and urge caution. Yeah. What we're about is we think crypto's two parts: Bitcoin, which is a rock and anybody can buy it, and the rest of the system: Ethereum, Solana, XRP, 1,000 meme coins, Dogecoin, all of that stuff, right? If you want to take money that you're going to punt at Randweg, right? Assume you spend $1,000 at Randweg to have a great weekend. Take the 1,000 away from that and then figure out what you want to do in this. I urge you, give the 1,000 to some funds manager, whether it is or us, and then talk to them about what you want to do between XRP and Solana and those sorts of things. Because with vol and stuff like that, you're just going to have your head handed to you.
Let's whilst you're talking about Bitcoin, Solana, XRP and what's not, do you think that we'll get to the point, because there seems to be a lot of crypto coins, meme coins out there, right? And people get frustrated because, they're seeing things on social media and they're following fake accounts. Do you think that we'll have in the crypto world, say, a nucleus of, say, 10 coins?
Yeah, I do.
And how far away do you think that, without putting you on the spot, and that comes back to the regulatory kind of part, really? Like, when do you think we'll get there?
Well, I think we got two. I mean, I think Ethereum and Bitcoin are clearly 2 out of 10. Yeah. I think Solana's got haters, but the truth is its moment is now, because it's so much lower cost network. Yeah. That for all of the meme coins and other rubbish things, Solana's an easier place to build on than Ethereum. Yeah. The rest of them, I think, too early to tell. We continue to sort of move in and out. There's a thing called SUI I like, but none of that, I'd sit there and tell you, is out of the nursery and out of venture capital yet at the moment. None of the others. So I'd say 2 are clearly going to last: Ethereum and Bitcoin. Solana, it's a coin toss at the moment. Then XRP, is Binance going to come back? What else is going to happen around that? Yeah. Very hard for me to say. I'm an XRP
What's
hater.
Your thought? I was just about to ask you that, actually, because I don't mind XRP and I don't know as much as you, but why?
No. Well, the problem is,
deep down. Why is that?
I'm short and wrong. Okay. It's centralized is the concern that I have. It's the same as Binance. It's very efficient and stuff like that. And then when you look at their rails, they've done a phenomenal job in capturing share of mind. But we've hated on it forever and just got our head handed to us by not being in it and being long Ethereum. So you're doing better than me when we're rounding. I don't know whether it's the first corner in the 10,000 meters or.
Do you think that XRP will somewhat take a chunk of the SWIFT transactional statement?
I think they're all going to, mate. I think XRP is going to do it very clearly. I think there's 1,000 of those at the moment. We have a joint venture with Circle, and we're doing $1 billion, $500 million to $1 billion a month. That's absolutely taken straight out of the arse of the SWIFT network. And remember, it's $170 or $180 billion of fees plus $1 trillion on the network that just gets locked up, and the banks get 3 days of interest while you're trying to send money to your great aunt in America, and it goes missing for 3 days. So why we like it is for exactly the reason you're talking about, which is there's a disrupt on SWIFT and international payments that's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be trillions of dollars, and who's the winner there? I don't think it has to be one person, but I want something that's got more decentralized integrity to it than Binance or XRP.
Do you think with the states really embracing wanting to be that crypto capital of the world, or crypto country of the world. Do you think that's a bold statement by the current administration, and do you think that they could do it?
Yeah, I 100% think they can do it. And I think what happens is, even if Trump gets marched out in the midterms and I don't see that happening at the moment, I think that he's got such a head of steam, he's going to surprise people, and I think Vance gets the next presidency. So I reckon they've got an 8-year run, the Republicans. Yeah. But, the great line, and I'm sure you had it when you were growing up in finance as well, is don't fight the Fed. Well, certainly you don't want to be fighting the Americans like this. And just for a moment, assume that I'm completely wrong and the Democrats get themselves together, even though they're the abject mess they are at the moment, and shut this all down. Yeah. You're going to have all of the Trump and Bitcoin maxis saying, well, this is what happens when the Democrats get elected. And because the Bitcoin is going to still be there and everything, sure, it's going to have another one of those crypto winters, but it ain't going away. Just that, when Trump said it's real, that was the time it became legitimate. It is going to last.
Do you think that they'll have like a commodity which is securing it? So there's a lot of talk out there where gold will be backed in some way, shape or form with some crypto. I mean, I'm probably putting you in the spot there. I'm not quite sure if you've heard that. I'm sure you have.
No, so two different things, right? You've got these gold stable coins that haven't really, which were genuinely backed by gold. Nobody got too excited about a gold stable, right? So that one. And then the strategic reserve, what's he got, 17 billion that he seized and said he didn't want to sell, yeah? Whether he gets to go from 17 to 170 billion or stays at 17, I don't know. But you look at all of those Gulf states, the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Kuwaitis, the Qataris, yeah? They're all sitting there and going, hold on, do we really want to have our money seized by the Americans the next time we have a fight with them? Or are we happy to own a strategic asset like Bitcoin? Now, you look at the Chinese. The Chinese have said, we want to own as much commodities, golds and other things, as we possibly can. And Xi at the moment is saying, or she, I keep on pronouncing it wrong, is saying we hate Bitcoin. But it don't take a lot for the Chinese to turn around and say, actually, Bitcoin's better and this thing is out of control. But I think you're going to see it from the Gulf states first, yeah? And then maybe you get one of the Europeans doing the same. Don't know.
Well, what's your insight? Where do you see it in the next 5 to 10 years?
I'm not a price guy, mate. I think the 170.
No, not price in terms of. Not in terms of price. I'm talking as human beings, day to day. We'll have play.
Yeah, if you were listening to the conversations I'm having with the tech guys who are doing AI and crypto at the moment, you just got no idea about what is going to come out of this. Absolutely nothing. Yeah. People say, oh, well, could it be the 1930s? It's like, no, it could be 1605 in terms of just how radically the world changes over the next 5 years. And you were saying before we got on about it being one of the most complex times to be in financial markets. I think it's one of the most complex times to be a human being. Yeah. The speed with which things are changing at the moment and the stuff that you have to wrap your mind around, it's just unimaginable. Yeah.
But also,
you go ahead, mate.
I also look at, let's, just super quick, being in both finance, the fiat system, where a house was, call it, Brisbane, 300,000.
Yep.
And then obviously, we're sitting at 1.1.
Yep.
It feels like the younger generation don't have much hope in terms of how am I supposed to be able to afford that? That they feel like they're kind of pushed into a corner. The future doesn't look bright. Where they're supposed to make money. They don't know much about shares. Everyone's talking about crypto. They don't know where to start. It feels to me that Bitcoin is giving people hope.
Yeah, and I say, we've created intergenerational Marxism, which is all of us who've got our houses have got the capital. And all these young kids with the labour, we've sat there and time again basically preference capital and especially housing capital over young, enterprising, energetic people. I mean, we're about to go into raise a fund to deal with we're trying to become the bank of mum and dad for people who don't have the bank of mum and dad, for exactly the reason you're talking about, which is, bright, enterprising people, men and women, who want to make a difference to Australia, want to make the world and Australia a better place, want to work hard, are shut out of the system at the moment because we've created this intergenerational divide. And if that wasn't bad enough, we shut them down for 3 years for a stupid virus that only killed old people, that started in a Chinese lab. What we've done to young people is just unimaginable.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's actually quite sad, right?
Yeah.
Hence why the population is obviously younger people aren't having kids as much. We've only got 2 people.
Because the middle class dream ain't there, which is I'll make it better for my kids than I got it for myself. Well, how am I going to get a house? I mean, just do the maths of $1 million house. Yeah.
But then how is crypto going to help them?
Well, 15% of world GDP is a regulatory and financial drag at the moment, which makes absolutely no sense, and which preferences the old and the people with money. Yeah. What this does is put into the hands of people a technology which, when it collides with AI, allows them to look at a whole series of what I'd call silicon-based economy rather than carbon-based economy, yeah, and take control of that. Now, my concern is it feels a bit more like gambling and going to the casino, and less like actually sitting there and saying, we hate the structure of the current economy where you preference old people over us. So they haven't been able to mobilise it in a sensible way at the moment. But I've got real hopes and there was a sort of false start with DAOs that could have done it. There's a false start with these couple of these, communities and places they've tried to do it. So they're trying. They just haven't been able to find some way to break out yet. But I think it's close, mate.
The final couple of things I want to just talk about is that, once I dived into a bit of crypto and understood it and the mathematical algorithms, correct me if I'm wrong, we talk about inflation.
Yeah.
And obviously with what we've been through, if we all adopted the crypto, given that we can the algorithms, it would actually sustain inflation?
No.
Would it increase? Do you think it would increase, or do you think it would? Obviously,
it would stay not sustain.
That's what I mean.
Absolutely.
Sorry,
absolutely. Because it sits there and says, hey, there's an anchor in the universe. There's only X Bitcoin here. That's the end, right? And we've got to anchor everything to that. It's the point about rebasing the stock market in gold rather than the Aussie dollar. You feel a lot less good about your shares, yeah? Because inflation's just eaten so much of the returns over a long period of time, yeah? And you look at how crazy, you look at our government at the moment sitting there and going, for absolutely no good reason, we're going to squander all this money on stupid stuff. And, both sides of politics sitting there and saying we're going to give the Yanks and the UK $1 trillion for AUKUS and stuff like that. I mean, just the profligacy of governments at the moment is just out of control.
Do you know, at Christmas I was sitting around with my parents and my wife's parents, and we were talking about crypto, and straight away, instantly, they're like, no, it's
scam.
Everything. Yeah. And then when I start to break it down with them, going, but let's look at the algorithm. Let's just say we print, $100,000, and then obviously it goes out, the inflation goes out, everything goes up. But then if we had crypto, well, the algorithm can kind of help us align it to go, well, let's not increase the price of milk.
Yep.
We don't need to improve because that's the price.
Yep.
Similar to go back to I think it was the 1936 or 1930s where gold standard helped us sustain.
Just look at the Bitcoin price of milk, mate. Look at the Bitcoin price of anything. It's absolutely collapsing, right?
And I think that's what everyone needs to get back to. There are certainly good things with it. Now, Mark, I know that you have to jet off, but a couple of questions of two actually, mate.
Yep.
The biggest hurdle still facing crypto?
Well, I think the biggest hurdle with Trump is behind us, right? I think the problem is in Australia, we're just absolutely walking around not understanding. So the biggest problem in Australia is no regulatory framework, no embrace. But you don't have, neither side of politics has got any good idea at the moment. They're not sitting there and thinking about how our young people are going to learn about AI, how they're going to learn about crypto, how they're going to learn about anything, right? So the biggest concern I have at the moment is for Australia, much more than America and the rest of the world. I just want us to embrace the future rather than sit there and hand five iron ore billionaires more and more tax-free dollars. Yeah, so that's my biggest concern
agree.
is and lack of political leadership in Australia. It worries the hell out of me, mate.
My wife's a school teacher. We always talk about the industrial revolution in terms of we're still somewhat kept there, and for the kids, we're not really teaching them anything about tech. Now, mate, this is probably more just to finish off. And I haven't asked you this prior. I know that you liked fishing. You mentioned that before you jumped on, mate. 3 people that you would like to have dinner with in the world,
live or dead?
Alive.
Alive. That's a really good question. Putin, Xi, and MBS, the guy in Saudi Arabia. I think they control the world.
Okay. We align ourselves with our thought process there, mate.
Yeah.
3 people you admire the most, and it can't be your parents or siblings, people that you admire the most.
So Charlie's number 1, Charlie Munger. I tell everyone, until you read poor Charlie's almanac, if you want to be investing, to use Charlie's phrase, you're like a one-legged man in an ass-kicking competition, right? So Charlie Munger, number 1, and read his poor Charlie's almanac. It's hard work, but it's really important. There's an obscure guy called George Kennan who wrote what defined the Cold War, a thing called the Long Telegram. He was the ambassador, the American ambassador to Moscow in the late 40s, and a profoundly intelligent person. So I thought his ability to actually think through and write a relatively short thing that defined 50 years of extraordinarily compelling long-term policy for America, just an extraordinary human being. So I think he'd be second. And it's a cliche, but I'd be fascinated to hear what Mandela said. And at the moment, I think just the more I look at the way the world's going, I just think what an extraordinary human being he must have been. To have those sorts of reserves of forgiveness is just in such short supply.
And how do you want to be remembered?
I want to be remembered that I was kind and I lived an interesting life. I maximized the opportunity to have a rich and diverse life while being kind to the people around me.
You would have seen a lot of wealthy people in your time.
Yep.
And a lot of people would associate them money and happiness to success.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
I say, look at all the stats. The stats say there's very little correlation. You can pick the numbers, whether it's $100,000 a year or $300,000 a year. There's very little correlation between the two. And what you're not seeing, what people aren't seeing is the sort of coterie of mental health problems, real mental health problems, more important, drug problems. What money does is buy you protection. And so for a whole series of people, they just end up in the crazy town land. They've got a coterie of yes men around them, and they're not living in the real world. They just want to get further and further away from it, fly around, stay away from real people.
Mark, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, mate. It was really good. I mean, it's great to see a really solid Aussie.
Well, would you believe, Mark, I was born in Scotland?
No, I would not.
No, you wouldn't.
Where, Glasgow or Edinburgh?
Just outside Glasgow, a place called Dumbarton, which is on the west coast. But I came across here when I was very young.
Have you read a book called How the Scots Invented the Modern World?
No.
You should go back and get it. It's really good because people like you really, really had a huge impact on the world, leaving Scotland for the rest of it.
Big time. I always often say to people, Scotland is my mother, Australia is my wife.
Beautiful.
And I love it dearly. But Mark, I'm going to connect with yourself ongoing and let's see if we can do this again, mate. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it. Fire us any questions. There's an area within our website that you can ask us any questions that you like. And feel free to subscribe to this podcast. If you can rate it, if you could please, that would be really appreciative. And feel free to send it amongst any of your friends and family. Thanks very much.